The Arizona sun was merciless that morning, spilling light like molten gold over the cracked asphalt of a forgotten industrial park on the outskirts of Phoenix. Ethan Cole leaned against his dented Ford Ranger, squinting toward the row of storage units baking in the heat. His dog, Max, a golden retriever with intelligent eyes and a coat that seemed too bright for the dust of the desert, panted beside him, tail brushing against Ethan's leg. It wasn't supposed to come to this. Ethan had once worked construction, steady job, decent pay, simple life. But when the housing market crashed and the company folded, so did his plans. Within months, he'd gone from building dream homes to living on unemployment checks. His girlfriend left when the savings ran dry. His landlord gave him until the end of the week to pay rent. $47 remained in his wallet. 47. He had come to the auction not because he believed in miracles, but because he needed one. "Next up, unit 134, the auctioneer shouted, his voice carrying across the parking lot. The small crowd shuffled closer, most of them regulars, men with rough hands, baseball caps, and the kind of eyes that could smell profit in a pile of dust. Ethan followed hesitantly, Max at his side, tail wagging at strangers who didn't care to notice. The auctioneer slid the latch free, lifted the metal door, and stepped back as the crowd peered inside. The unit was dim, stacked floor to ceiling with black trash bags. Dozens of them. Some torn, spilling fabric or newspaper. Others sealed tightly, marked with faded tape. A stale smell rolled out, something between mold and regret. The crowd groaned. "Looks like a dump," someone muttered. Another laughed. "You'd need a hazmat suit to touch that mess." Ethan stood at the back, silent. He wasn't looking for treasure. He just wanted something he could clean, flip, and maybe sell for gas money. "All right," the auctioneer called. "Who'll start me off at 50? No one moved. 30? Still silence. Ethan's fingers tightened around Max's leash. The dog's ears perked, gaze fixed on the shadowed corner of the unit. 20? A man near the front chuckled. "I wouldn't pay 5 for that." The auctioneer sighed. "All right, last call. Anyone? $10? Ethan felt something stir, instinct, maybe desperation, maybe both. He raised his hand. 40, he said before he could stop himself. Heads turned. The crowd blinked, surprised. 40? The auctioneer repeated. "You got it, kid. Sold for 40. The gavel hit the clipboard with a hollow thud. The crowd moved on to the next unit, leaving Ethan and Max alone with their prize. He approached the open door slowly. The air was thick with dust, hot and stale. Max sniffed the threshold, then took a cautious step inside. Ethan dragged one of the trash bags into the light. It tore slightly, revealing cracked dishes and a faded stuffed bear missing an eye. "Well, buddy," he muttered, "looks like we just bought someone's memories." He sat on the curb, wiping sweat from his forehead. The sun burned above, unrelenting. "Guess we'll start sorting," he said to Max, forcing a grin. The dog wagged his tail once, then froze. His ears twitched. He turned sharply toward the back of the unit, staring at something Ethan couldn't see. A low growl rumbled from his chest. Ethan frowned. "What is it?" Max didn't move, didn't blink, just kept staring. Ethan followed his gaze. Nothing but a shadowed pile of bags and a rusted metal shelf. He exhaled, shaking his head. "You're seeing ghosts, pal." But even as he said it, a chill crept down his spine. He stepped back into the darkness, flashlight in hand, the beam cutting through the dust. Each bag was tied with care, labeled with black marker. Some said, "Winter clothes," others junk, and a few had only dates scrawled across them. 1995, 1998, 1999. That last year stood out. He crouched, brushing dirt off one labeled, "Do not open minus 1998. Someone didn't want this touched," he muttered. Max sniffed the bag, nose twitching, then whimpered softly. Ethan stared at it a moment longer. "Not now," he said finally, dropping it aside. "We'll deal with that later." Hours passed as he sorted through broken toys, empty picture frames, and piles of musty clothes. Sweat drenched his shirt. Each discovery seemed sadder than the last someone's life reduced to garbage. Yet one thing kept nagging him. Why pay for storage for this long? The unit hadn't been opened in decades, judging by the dust. And the labels, they weren't random. They looked methodical, deliberate. He leaned against the wall, exhausted. "I really outdid myself this time, huh, Max?" The dog tilted his head as if agreeing. Just as Ethan gathered his tools to leave, Max began scratching again, this time near the far right corner, his claws scraping the concrete. "Hey, stop," Ethan said, hurrying over. But Max didn't stop. He pawed harder, growling softly. Ethan crouched beside him and noticed that one bag wasn't like the others. It wasn't black. It was dark green, thick, almost military grade. It had no dust on it, no label. His pulse quickened. "Where did this come from?" he whispered. He grabbed the bag, dragging it toward the light. It was heavier than the rest, filled with something solid. The knot was tied tight, layers of duct tape sealing the top. For a long moment, Ethan hesitated. Every logical part of him said to leave it, but curiosity had already taken hold. "All right," he murmured. "Let's see what secrets you've got." He sliced through the tape with his pocket knife. The plastic peeled back slowly, releasing a faint metallic scent, not rot, not decay, something older, deeper. He reached in and pulled out a small wooden box, dark with age, carved with the initials JM on the lid. It was heavier than it looked. Max barked once, tail wagging nervously. Ethan sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, fingers trembling. The latch was rusted shut, but a hard tug broke it free. The lid creaked open, and for a second he couldn't breathe. Inside were small velvet pouches. Dozens of them. He opened one and froze. Gold coins. Bright, heavy, unmistakable gold. His heart thudded in his chest. He opened another pouch, antique jewelry, watches, silver ingots. "This can't be real," he whispered. He grabbed his phone, wiping dust off the screen, and typed the initials, JM Arizona Antiques. The first result made his blood run cold. Jack Murray, missing since 1999. Last seen leaving his antique shop in Phoenix. Case unsolved. Estimated assets missing. Over $2 million in rare artifacts. Ethan looked back at the box. The weight of it suddenly felt heavier. "Max," he whispered, "we didn't just buy junk. We just found someone's secret." The dog sat beside him, silent now, eyes fixed on the box as if understanding the gravity of what they'd uncovered. Outside, the wind picked up, slamming the metal door shut with a loud clang. Ethan jumped, nearly dropping the box. Max barked sharply, his fur bristling. "All right," Ethan muttered, forcing a laugh that didn't feel real. "Let's pack up and go before this place gives me a heart attack." He loaded the box into his truck, careful not to draw attention from the few bidders still loitering near the exit. Max leapt into the passenger seat, still tense. As the engine started, Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, he could have sworn he saw movement, a flicker of a shadow in the unit's darkness. He blinked. It was gone. The drive home was quiet, the sun dipping low behind the desert hills. Ethan's mind spun faster than his tires, questions, possibilities, fear. What had he really bought? Whose treasure was this? And why had it been hidden for over 25 years? He reached over, scratching Max's head. "You've got one good nose, boy," he said softly. "But something tells me this time we found more than we bargained for." The dog's tail thumped once against the seat, eyes glancing toward the box on the floorboard. And though Ethan didn't know it yet, that single impulsive bid, the $40 gamble no one else wanted, was about to unravel a story buried in time, a secret guarded by greed, and a mystery that would turn a desperate man and his loyal dog into the center of an investigation decades in the making. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The old wooden box sat on the kitchen table, glimmering faintly under the single flickering bulb. Every so often, he'd catch himself staring at it, unable to decide whether it was a blessing or a curse. Max slept near the door, but even he stirred restlessly, occasionally lifting his head as if hearing something Ethan couldn't. Ethan poured himself another cup of bitter instant coffee and rubbed his eyes. "What am I supposed to do with you?" he muttered to the box. "Gold coins, antique jewelry, a man's initials Jane in a missing person case 2 decades old." He had looked it up again before bed, hoping he'd misread something. But the same article glared back at him. Phoenix antique dealer Jack Murray disappeared December 1999. Police suspect theft and foul play. Missing inventory valued at over $2 million. The air conditioner rattled in the background, but it couldn't stop the sweat beating on his neck. He took a breath, trying to think rationally. It's probably stolen. But what if it isn't? What if it's evidence? His voice echoed faintly off the peeling walls. Max whimpered, and Ethan glanced at him. "You think we should call the cops, huh?" The dog blinked, but stayed silent. "Yeah, that's what I thought." Ethan chuckled dryly. "We'd lose everything. They'd take it all. Maybe even arrest me for touching it." He stood, pacing. "I could just keep it. Melt it, sell it slow. Nobody would ever know." But the thought left a sour taste in his mouth. He'd never been that kind of man. For a long time, he stared at the box. Then he sighed. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just some guy's junk. A coincidence. But the unease wouldn't leave. He finally crashed onto the couch near dawn, Max curling beside him. The last thing he saw before sleep dragged him under was the carved initials on that box staring back like eyes. The next morning, the desert was already hot. Ethan drove back to the storage lot to clean the rest of the unit, hoping work might calm his thoughts. The same auctioneer was there, unlocking another row. "Back for more punishment?" he joked. "Just cleaning up my bad decisions," Ethan replied. The man laughed. "Yeah, those black bag units are cursed. Been sitting unpaid for years. You probably bought a nest of spiders and bad luck." Ethan forced a grin and headed to Unit 134. The air inside was still thick with dust and silence. Rays of sunlight pierced through the cracked door, catching on suspended particles. Max trotted ahead, sniffing every corner with purpose. Ethan pulled on his gloves and began sorting. Broken toasters, old newspapers, cracked porcelain, nothing of value. Yet everything felt deliberate, as if someone had carefully packed this chaos. Halfway through the third pile, Max froze again. His ears twitched, tail stiff. "What now?" Ethan asked, walking over. The dog was staring at the back wall. Ethan followed his gaze and noticed something he'd missed before. The wall wasn't metal like the others. A large wooden board covered the lower panel, nailed crudely in place. He crouched and brushed away dust. Behind the cracks, something glinted faintly. "Hidden compartment?" he murmured. He grabbed his screwdriver from the truck and pried the board loose. It creaked loudly, then fell forward, scattering dust across the floor. Behind it lay a small cavity, maybe 3 feet deep. Inside were 3 more bags, different from the rest gray plastic instead of black, taped with care. Ethan hesitated. This just keeps getting weirder, doesn't it, Max? The retriever wagged his tail once, nose pressed toward the opening. Ethan dragged the first bag out and cut it open. Inside was a stack of yellowed folders, neatly labeled and tied with string. He untied one and flipped through it. Each page was an old invoice, dated between 1995 and 1998. They all bore the same signature, Jack Murray. At the bottom of each page, in red ink, was the word copy. He opened another bag. More paperwork. Receipts, inventory sheets, even photos of rare antiques. Some he recognized from the online database of missing items. Ethan's hands trembled. This is evidence, he whispered. He pulled out the final bag, the smallest of the three. It was heavier. Inside, instead of paper, was a VHS tape labeled Property of J.M. and a small black pouch tied with string. He untied it and out spilled a tarnished silver locket. Inside the locket, under cracked glass, was a faded photograph. A man with slick hair and a warm smile, his arm around a woman with gentle eyes. On the back of the photo were the words, "For Martha, always yours." Martha, Ethan repeated quietly. His wife. He checked his phone again, scrolling through the missing person article. And there she was, Martha Murray, widow of Jack Murray, still living in Phoenix. A small quote from her interview read, "They said my husband stole those antiques, but he wasn't a thief. Someone wanted him gone." Ethan swallowed hard. The air in the unit suddenly felt thinner. He looked at Max. "We found something real, didn't we?" The dog barked once, sharp and certain. That night, Ethan laid everything out on his table. The wooden box, the paperwork, the VHS tape, the locket. His tiny apartment felt smaller with every object staring back at him. He ran his fingers over the tape's label. No player, no way to watch it. But his neighbor, Mr. Ramirez, had old electronics piled in his garage. Maybe he had a VCR. Ethan grabbed the tape and crossed the dusty hallway to knock. Ramirez opened the door in a grease-stained shirt, surprised. "Ethan, mi amigo. What's up? You still have that VCR you mentioned last month?" The old man grinned. "Yeah, I keep everything." "Why?" I found something old. Just curious to see what's on it." Ramirez waved him in. "Sure, come in. Let's fire it up." They plugged the VCR into a small TV that buzzed to life. Ethan slid in the tape. Static filled the screen, and an image flickered into focus, a cluttered room full of antiques. A man stood in the frame, middle-aged, dark hair slicked back, nervous eyes darting toward the door. It was Jack Murray. Ethan froze. On screen, Jack spoke in a low, hurried tone. "If you're watching this, I've been found. They want the shipment. I didn't steal it. I hid it. It belongs to the museum. They'll come for me soon." He looked over his shoulder, breathing heavily. "Martha, if you see this, don't trust anyone from the auction house. Especially." A loud bang cut him off. Jack turned, startled. The image shook violently, and the screen went black. Ramirez frowned. "That's it?" Ethan ejected the tape slowly, heart pounding. "That was Jack Murray," he whispered. Ramirez's eyes widened. "The one from the news?" "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. "This was never meant to be found." He thanked the old man and hurried home, Max padding close behind. The city felt different at night, darker, watchful. Every passing car made him glance over his shoulder. By the time he reached his apartment, his hands were shaking. He locked the door and set the tape beside the box. "Someone hid this stuff for a reason," he said softly. And I think that reason just found me. Max growled low, ears pricked toward the window. Ethan turned off the lights. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the fridge. He sat down, back against the wall, trying to breathe. Outside, across the street, a pair of headlights lingered longer than necessary before driving off into the night. Ethan didn't notice. But Max did. His eyes followed the car until it disappeared. Somewhere deep inside, the loyal dog already sensed what Ethan hadn't yet realized. They hadn't just stumbled into a mystery. They'd reopened one. And someone out there might not want it solved. The air inside the storage unit felt heavier now. Ethan stood motionless, the beam of his flashlight shaking slightly in his hand. Max's growl echoed low and steady, his tail stiff, nose pressed near a pile of old duffel bags. Ethan hesitated before crouching. "Easy, boy," he whispered, voice dry. His heart pounded like a drum. He could smell something faintly metallic. Not blood, not quite, but sharp enough to make his chest tighten. He reached forward, unzipped the first bag halfway. Inside, he found nothing more than clothing. Torn jeans, faded shirts, all smelling of mildew. But under those, something glinted. He pulled out a silver locket, tarnished and bent, with the initials MEZ engraved on its back. Ethan frowned. That same initial pattern had been on a rusted toolbox he'd found earlier. Coincidence? Maybe, but when he opened the locket, his breath caught. Inside was a tiny photo of a little girl, maybe 5 years old, smiling beside a tall man with a scruffy beard. The photo's edges were burned, like someone had tried to destroy it, but stopped halfway. Max whimpered suddenly and pawed at another trash bag in the corner. "What now, buddy?" Ethan muttered, half nervous, half curious. He tore the plastic open. Out spilled stacks of old newspapers, yellowed, brittle, and one by one, headlines began to appear. Local man missing after factory fire minus 2002. Police suspect foul play in Riverdale case. Daughter still searching for father 15 years later. Ethan's pulse quickened. The man in the picture, the beard, the shape of the face, looked eerily similar to the photo printed on the front page. He sat back, flashlight trembling on the floor. The storage unit wasn't just filled with junk. It was a time capsule of someone's tragedy. Someone had paid to keep this locked away for years, to bury something that shouldn't have been found. Then he heard it, a faint click. Ethan froze. Max's ears shot up, hackles raised. That sound hadn't come from him. It was metallic, sharp, like a latch being unhooked. He turned slowly toward the far wall, where an old metal cabinet stood half-hidden under tarp. "Hello?" he called, his voice breaking slightly. No answer. He stood, knees stiff, flashlight fixed on the cabinet. The light reflected off something. A padlock, freshly broken. Not rusted, not old. Someone had been here recently. Max barked sharply. Ethan's instincts screamed run, but curiosity pulled harder. He approached and pulled the tarp back. The smell hit him first. Stale air mixed with something chemical, like old paint thinner. He opened the cabinet door carefully. Inside were dozens of manila folders, neatly stacked. Each one had a name written in black marker. Johnson's, Miller, Harper, Sandler. He flipped through them quickly. All local families, all from the same decade. Then, on the bottom shelf, he found one marked M. Sloan, the initials again. He opened it. Inside were photographs, surveillance style, taken from a distance. A little girl at a playground. A man walking home at night. And a series of receipts stapled together. Storage rent payments, all under a fake name. Ethan's chest went tight. Whoever M. Sloan was, someone had been following him. For years. Max suddenly barked again, this time louder, frantic. Ethan turned just in time to see movement at the storage door. A shadow passing the narrow slit of light. He lunged forward, grabbed the door handle, and yanked it open. Nothing. Just the empty hallway, lined with silent, numbered units. "Someone's playing with us," he muttered, locking the door shut again. He leaned against the wall, breathing hard, the folder still in his hands. His life had been a mess before this. Job gone, rent overdue, barely scraping by. But this was something else. It felt like he had stumbled into a story meant to stay buried. Then, as he crouched again, Max began pawing near the back corner of the unit, digging at the concrete. Ethan knelt beside him and scraped away the dust. There, hidden beneath a thin layer of dirt, was a square metal hatch. "What the hell?" he whispered. He pried at the edge with a screwdriver, and after a few tries, the hatch lifted, revealing a narrow hole beneath, barely large enough for a person to crawl through. A cold draft drifted up from below. Max whined, backing away slightly, but Ethan's curiosity was uncontrollable now. He shone his flashlight down the hole. It looked like a tunnel. Old wooden beams lined the sides, cobwebs thick like curtains. It didn't make sense. A tunnel under a storage unit? Who would even build that? He hesitated for a moment, but then he heard something faint, a metallic clang, echoing from below. Someone or something was down there. Ethan tightened his grip on the flashlight. "Stay here, Max." But Max barked once, defiantly, tail stiff. Ethan sighed. "Fine. Together." He lowered himself slowly, the metal creaking under his weight. The tunnel smelled of rust and damp earth. As he crawled, the air grew colder. His light flickered once, then steadied. Old pipes ran along the walls, and faded chalk marks dotted the beams, symbols, numbers, and arrows pointing deeper in. About 20 feet in, Ethan stopped. Ahead was a small underground room, maybe an old maintenance chamber, filled with more boxes. But these weren't garbage bags. They were sealed crates marked with faded stencils. U.S. property. Do not remove. His breath hitched. He brushed off the dust on one of the crates. The label beneath read Evidence Storage, Federal Use Only. Ethan froze. Somehow, this unit was connected to something much bigger, something federal, secret, and deliberately hidden. Max began to whine, tail tucked low. Then, from the shadows at the far end of the room, came the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps. Ethan spun, flashlight darting toward the noise. "Who's there?" he shouted, voice cracking in the damp air. No answer. Just the sound of boots scraping against dirt. Then a man's voice, deep, steady, and cold, echoed back. "You shouldn't have opened that, Mr. Cole." Ethan's stomach dropped. "How do you know my name?" he whispered, stepping backward, pulse pounding. The man stepped forward into the light, rugged, older, wearing a tattered security jacket. His badge gleamed faintly, but the name on it made Ethan's skin crawl. M. Sloan? The same name from the file. The same initials from the locket. Ethan's mind spun. "That's impossible," he muttered. You're dead." The man tilted his head slightly, a strange smile forming. "Dead?" he said softly. "That's what they wanted people to think." Max growled low, teeth bared. The man took one slow step closer. "Now," he said, "you're going to help me finish what they started." Ethan felt his world tilt. Confusion, fear, disbelief. But one thing was certain. Whatever was hidden beneath that storage unit was no accident. It was a secret buried alive. And he'd just dug it up. The tunnel trembled faintly, dust sprinkling from the ceiling. Ethan couldn't tell if it was from his heartbeat or the weight of what stood before him, the man who was supposed to be dead. Max's growl echoed softly in the low-ceilinged space. Ethan's flashlight trembled in his hand as the beam lit the stranger's face, weathered, tired, but unmistakably alive. "M. Sloan," Ethan muttered. The man nodded once, slow, like a teacher confirming a student's impossible answer. "People like you aren't supposed to find this place," Sloan said. His voice had a gravelly calmness, like a man who'd made peace with his ghosts. "But fate's funny that way, isn't it?" Ethan didn't speak. He was frozen between fear and disbelief. Sloan looked down at Max. "Good dog," he murmured. Max didn't growl this time, just stared, ears twitching, uncertain. "What is this?" Ethan asked finally, his voice tight. "These crates, these files, you're supposed to be dead. They said you died in that fire." Sloan's expression flickered, just for a moment. That's what they needed the world to believe. He walked past Ethan, dragging his fingers along the nearest crate. The gesture was casual, but every move radiated caution, control, the way soldiers move when they know every inch of their surroundings. Ethan stepped back. Why fake your death? And why hide under a storage unit? Sloan's eyes narrowed. Because when you uncover the wrong truth, you don't get second chances. You vanish. Or you burn. He turned to one of the crates, pried it open with a rusted crowbar, and pulled out a dusty binder. Inside were photos, documents, and printed emails. He tossed it onto the ground between them. "Read," he ordered. Ethan knelt slowly, flipping through the first few pages. The pictures were black and white surveillance images. Men in suits meeting at docks, military trucks parked at night, and boxes, identical to the ones in this room, being loaded into unmarked vans. The documents referenced something called Project Harbinger. "What is this?" Ethan whispered. Sloan's eyes darkened. A program that never existed, officially. It started after 9/11s, a joint project between private contractors and a few powerful people in Washington. They were supposed to be testing security protocols. Instead, he paused, exhaling. Instead, they started using small towns as blind test sites. Unregistered experiments. Chemical dispersal, psychological data gathering, biometric surveillance, all off record. Ethan's stomach twisted. That's insane, is it? Sloan's tone was calm but sharp. Because I saw it. I worked security for one of the companies involved. Until I found out what they were really doing. He glanced at Ethan, eyes filled with something heavy regret. I tried to blow the whistle. The night before the fire, I sent copies of everything to the press. They burned the factory before the story could break. My family was taken into protection. I disappeared. Ethan stared at him, feeling the weight of the story sink into his bones. And now? Sloan crouched, his voice dropping. Now they're coming back. Cleaning house. Anyone who ever knew, anyone who ever talked, gone. Max barked suddenly, the sound sharp and urgent. Both men froze. Then they heard it, footsteps again, echoing from the tunnel behind them. Sloan's head snapped toward the sound. They found us. Who? Ethan asked, panic in his voice. Doesn't matter, Sloan hissed. He grabbed Ethan by the arm and dragged him toward the far end of the chamber. We have to move, now. They ducked through a narrow passage line with rusted pipes and broken beams. The light from behind flickered as someone entered the main chamber, shadows moving in slow, deliberate motions. Sloan switched off Ethan's flashlight, plunging them into near darkness. He whispered, "Quiet." Ethan held his breath, heart hammering. Max pressed close against his leg, silent but trembling. Then came voices, low, distorted through gas masks. "Check the crates," one said. "We have confirmation movement was detected." Ethan's mind reeled. Whoever they weren't ordinary looters. Their boots crunched methodically on the gravel floor. Sloane motioned Ethan forward, crawling silently through the tunnel until they reached another metal hatch above. He pushed it open slowly, revealing a faint blue glow, streetlights. They climbed up into the cold night air behind the storage complex. Ethan gasped for breath, gulping the chill. Who were they? He asked. Sloane didn't answer immediately. He scanned the lot with narrowed eyes. Private contractors, he said finally. Government ghosts. They make people disappear for a living. Ethan stared at him. So what now? You hide forever? Sloane turned to him sharply. No. Now you help me finish this. Me? Why me? Because you're already part of it. You opened the box. You saw the files. They won't stop until every trace of this is gone, including you. Ethan swallowed hard. The cold cut through his jacket. Max sat beside him, panting softly, sensing his hesitation. Sloane stepped closer, his expression shifting from anger to something like sympathy. You said you were desperate, right? You've got nothing left to lose. Then maybe it's time to make that desperation mean something. Ethan wanted to argue, to walk away, to pretend none of this was happening. But then he remembered the burnt photo, the child smiling beside this man. A life stolen, erased. And the idea of letting those files vanish again made something inside him harden. He nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? Sloane's lips twitched into the faintest smile. First, we get evidence out. There's a woman, investigative journalist. She's the only one who believed my story years ago. Name's Marissa Tate. She works in D.C. If we can get these documents to her, the truth has a chance. And if we can't? Ethan asked. Sloane looked toward the dark sky. Then they win, again. A gust of wind swept through the lot, carrying the faint smell of smoke, not from the city, but closer. Ethan's head snapped around. Flames flickered inside one of the far storage units. Then another. They're burning the evidence, Sloane muttered. We have to move now. They sprinted toward Ethan's truck, Max keeping pace at his side. Behind them, orange light licked at the horizon as unit after unit ignited. The air filled with the sharp scent of burning plastic. As they sped away, Sloane sat rigid in the passenger seat, watching the flames fade in the mirror. They don't waste time, he said quietly. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter. Then neither do we. For the first time in months, he felt something he hadn't felt since losing everything, purpose. Max rested his head on Ethan's knee, eyes alert as if sensing the storm still ahead. Sloane turned toward him, voice low but steady. You understand what you've stepped into? Ethan nodded. Yeah, but if what you're saying is true, someone needs to drag it into the light. Sloane's gaze hardened. Then keep driving. The truth's waiting, but so are the people trying to bury it. Outside, the night stretched endlessly ahead, the road illuminated by nothing but the truck's headlights, two desperate souls, and one loyal dog speeding toward a truth, powerful enough to destroy them both. The highway stretched out before them like an endless ribbon of black, headlights cutting swaths through the darkness. Ethan gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. Max pressed against his side, tail low but tense. Sloane sat rigid in the passenger seat, eyes scanning rearview mirrors every few seconds, as though expecting the unknown forces chasing them to appear at any moment. D.C. is a long drive, Ethan muttered. His voice carried exhaustion and unease. You sure she'll believe us? Sloane's jaw tightened. Marissa Tate doesn't just believe stories. She verifies them. And she's one of the few people in the country with the guts to publish what really happens behind closed doors. If anyone can expose this, it's her. Ethan swallowed. Exposure could get us killed. Or saved, Sloane countered sharply. It depends on how fast we move. For hours, the truck rolled through the desert, then past the flat plains of New Mexico and Texas. Ethan's mind spun with questions. How deep did this conspiracy go? Who had killed people to hide the truth? And most importantly, could they trust anyone, ever again? Max barked suddenly, yanking him out of thought. Ahead, lights flashed, red and blue, reflected across the hood of the truck. Sloane's hand shot up. Police? No, not local. They moved too fast, too coordinated. Pull over now. Ethan's stomach dropped. He swerved slightly, taking a narrow dirt shoulder. From the darkness, two black SUVs materialized like ghosts. The vehicles didn't slow. Instead, their headlights flicked in a deliberate pattern, scanning for escape routes. They're tracking us, Sloane muttered, voice grim. They've been monitoring movement near the storage. They know we have the evidence. Ethan's grip tightened. How? We didn't even touch the streets yet. They have eyes everywhere, Sloane said flatly. Cameras, satellites, informants. You'd be surprised how small a leak can look like a flood to people like them. The SUVs adjusted, cutting off the next exit. Ethan's heart thumped violently. We can't outrun them, he whispered. Sloane leaned closer, eyes narrowing. Then we don't run. We get clever. There's an old service road up ahead. Gravel, barely visible on Google Maps. Take it. Ethan obeyed, tires crunching on the loose rocks, sending dust into the dry night air. The SUVs skidded, almost colliding with each other. For a few moments, they lost sight of the truck. Ethan exhaled shakily. Good thinking, Sloane said. But we're not safe yet. Hours later, they crossed the Potomac River, bridge into the outskirts of Washington, D.C., neon lights reflected in puddles from a sudden evening rain. The city smelled of concrete, exhaust, and life that never slept. Sloane guided them down narrow alleys until they reached a brick-lined office building tucked between a bookstore and a cafe. It looked abandoned, but Ethan knew better. This is her place, Sloane said softly. Tate Investigative. She works mostly nights, like us. Think of it as home turf for truth. They parked and moved quickly inside. The office smelled faintly of coffee, paper, and electronics, a combination that screamed journalism. Rows of monitors lined the walls, some flickering with live feeds from public streets, others displaying documents, maps, and news clips. A woman emerged from a back room, tall, confident, with sharp eyes that scanned the intruders in a heartbeat. Marissa Tate. She had a presence that demanded attention, even from men twice her size. I assume you're not here to apply for an internship, she said dryly, crossing her arms. Sloane stepped forward. We have something you need to see. It's important. Lives depend on it. Marissa raised an eyebrow. That's everyone's line when they bring me trouble. Why should I care? Ethan swallowed, stepping forward, holding the wooden box. Because this isn't just trouble, he said quietly. It's a conspiracy, deadly, and it's been hidden for over 20 years. Marissa's eyes flicked to the box, then to Sloane. Jack Murray, she said slowly, recognition dawning. I thought he. You were supposed to be dead. Not dead, Sloane said flatly. Not really. For the next hour, they laid everything out. The files, the VHS tape, the burned photograph, and the receipts. Ethan watched Marissa's eyes widen as she scanned each document. This is massive, she whispered, voice trembling. If this gets published. Her gaze flicked to Sloane. They'll come for you. Sloane nodded. We know. Marissa's expression hardened. Then we do this smart. We don't just publish. We plan, verify, leak strategically. If the wrong people find out too soon, this ends badly. For all of us. Ethan's stomach churned. And if they already know? They don't know we're here, Marissa replied. Not yet. But they're watching, always. Sloane's voice dropped. We have one window. 3 days. Then they'll mobilize fully. By then, they'll track everything we touch. 3 days. Ethan repeated it in his head like a mantra. His mind flashed back to the shadows in the storage tunnel, the footsteps, the cold, the fire consuming the crates. They weren't just uncovering history, they were painting targets on themselves. Marissa stood abruptly. We start tonight. First, digitize the files. Encrypt them. Then we prepare backup copies. Physical and digital. If they hit one, the other survives. She looked directly at Ethan. You're the driver. You know the routes. You know what they don't see. That makes you as valuable as the evidence itself. Ethan swallowed. And Max? He asked, looking at the dog curled under the desk. Marissa smiled faintly. He's our security detail. The hours blurred. Ethan, Sloane, and Marissa worked through the night. Papers were scanned, photographs uploaded to encrypted drives, VHS tape footage digitized and verified. Every so often, Ethan would glance at Max, alert, ears twitching, as though the dog could sense danger long before humans could. Finally, at dawn, Marissa leaned back in her chair, exhaustion visible on her face. We've got it. Copies. Multiple. Even the originals can't be destroyed without us knowing. Sloane exhaled, voice quiet. Good. That buys us time. Ethan's gaze fell on the box, now empty except for the velvet pouches. And after we release this? Marissa's eyes glinted. After this? We make sure the world knows the truth. That Murray's story is finished. And that the people responsible face consequences. Outside, the first light of dawn painted the DC skyline a pale orange. But for Ethan, Sloane, and Max, the city already felt dangerous. Every shadow a potential threat, every honking car a reminder that their enemies could be watching. And deep in the back of Ethan's mind, a question lingered. Would anyone survive once the truth finally saw the light? The DC skyline glimmered faintly behind the office windows, but inside, tension pulsed like an electric current. Ethan rubbed his eyes, still shaky from the overnight grind, while Max lay at his feet, ears pricked and alert. Sloane hovered near the monitors, reviewing the digitized files, his fingers brushing over the keyboard as if the slightest touch might summon danger. Marissa Tate paced the office, phone pressed against her ear, low murmurs punctuated by clicks. Her normally composed demeanor had hardened. Every muscle was tense. Yes, we have the backups ready, she said. No mistakes. Triple-check the encryption. Ethan watched her and felt the weight of the operation press down. He had been desperate before, scraping by day to day, but now desperation had transformed into urgency. This wasn't about survival anymore. It was about exposing something that could shake the country. Did you see the news? Ethan finally asked, glancing at a small TV in the corner. Marissa shook her head. Nothing yet. They won't know until the first leak. Which is good. It buys us time. A faint hum came from the street outside, barely noticeable. Max lifted his head, growling softly. Ethan stiffened. Then came a noise metal scraping, faint but deliberate, like the scratch of a crowbar. Sloane's eyes snapped to the door. They're here, he whispered, voice cold. Ethan's heart raced. Who? They've found a way to track us. Could be anyone, contractors, ex-agents, people we thought were dead. Doesn't matter. They're after the evidence. The office door rattled. Marissa's hand shot to the lock on the side of the building. "We need to move it now," she said. "Grab the encrypted drives and the originals. Everything." We split into 2 teams. Sloan, Ethan, Max stay together. "I'll take the others through the back exit. Move." Ethan swept the box and drives into his bag, Max jumping into his arms for a moment, sensing the tension. The 3 slipped out of the office into a narrow alley behind the building. Rain had started again, slicking the bricks, washing away footprints, but it also added a layer of danger. Slippery, noisy, unpredictable. From the street, a black SUV rolled slowly into view, headlights cutting through the dim, rain-soaked haze. Ethan froze. The vehicle stopped near the alley, doors clicking open. 2 men in dark suits emerged, their faces obscured by low-brimmed hats and collars pulled high. Sloan whispered, "Run." Ethan bolted, Max tight against his chest, adrenaline igniting his muscles. Sloan followed, keeping a few steps behind, darting down a side street that led toward the metro. The SUVs tried to block them, but the narrow alleys gave them cover. They ducked into a service tunnel, its concrete walls damp and slimy. Ethan's chest burned from exertion, but the need to survive, to protect the evidence, kept him moving. Max barked sharply, sensing a second presence. A shadow moved near the tunnel entrance. Ethan froze. Sloan held up a hand, signaling him to stay low. Then, without warning, a figure lunged from the darkness. Ethan swung the bag instinctively. It connected with a solid thud, and the attacker crumpled to the ground. Max barked, teeth bared. Ethan's stomach churned as he realized just how close they had come to being caught. Sloan stepped over the fallen man, keeping his eyes sharp for more threats. "Too many," Sloan muttered. "They're organized. They never miss." Ethan panted. "We can't outrun them forever." "Then we don't," Sloan said, voice low. "We make them think we've vanished. We split, and we disappear into the city. We move tonight. No trails, no patterns. They'll panic." Hours later, the trio emerged near an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The building reeked of decay, but it offered safety and silence. Ethan set down his bag, hands shaking. Max circled him once, then sat, still alert. Sloan pulled out a small flashlight and checked the drives. All intact. No traces. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "How much longer until we can reach Marissa with this?" Sloan hesitated. "If we move now, a few hours. But the city isn't safe. They have eyes everywhere." The rain had slowed, but puddles reflected dim streetlights, turning the asphalt into a mirror. A distant siren wailed, the sound echoing through the empty streets. Ethan felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. At any moment, they could be discovered, and everything they had risked could be destroyed. Then Sloan moved closer, tone grim. "We can't trust anyone else. Not yet. Not until this is released. Every step is dangerous. Every word we speak could be monitored." Ethan nodded. "So we go in silence." The hours crawled. Max leaned against Ethan's legs, ears twitching, occasionally growling at shadows or distant sounds. Time stretched, tense and suffocating. They communicated without words, each movement deliberate, each sound calculated. The city around them was alive, but alive in a way that threatened them, a predator lurking in plain sight. Finally, they reached a safe house, a small apartment rented under a false name. Marissa was waiting, pacing nervously. "You made it," she said, relief in her voice. "I was starting to think they got you." Ethan set the bag down, letting Max leap out to stretch. They were close. Too close. Marissa grabbed the drives, setting up a secure connection to her server. "If we're going to release this," she said, "we need verification first." Every document, every receipt, every image must be authenticated. Then, and only then, we hit the public with a full report. Half measures will get people killed. Sloan nodded, exhaustion evident in the lines of his face. Then we work. Tonight, we finish what they started, before they finish us. The city lights flickered outside the window, distant yet omnipresent. For Ethan, the adrenaline had not faded, it had sharpened. Each moment was a reminder that they were dancing on a knife's edge, and the people pursuing them would not hesitate to end the dance with violence. He glanced at Max. The dog seemed to understand the stakes, tail flicking, ears attentive. Together, they had stumbled into a conspiracy that was decades in the making, and for the first time, Ethan felt a sense of purpose stronger than fear. Marissa began her work, scanning, encrypting, and verifying every file. Sloan coordinated routes and contingencies. Ethan stayed alert, guarding entrances, checking surveillance feeds, and monitoring the city streets. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to the storm of secrets and danger brewing within one unremarkable apartment. But Ethan knew it wouldn't be long before the hunters closed in. And somewhere out there, in the shadows of Washington, D.C., someone was already plotting the next move, one designed to stop them permanently. Max whined softly, nudging Ethan's hand. He looked down at the dog, feeling a pang of guilt and determination. Whatever happened, they wouldn't let this end quietly. Because some truths, once uncovered, demanded justice. And some secrets refused to stay buried. The apartment was silent, save for the soft hum of computers and the occasional click of a mouse. Ethan sat near the window, flashlight on, Max curled at his feet, ears twitching at every distant sound. The city seemed calm, almost serene, but they all knew it was a facade. Danger was out there, moving quietly, patiently, like a predator circling its prey. Sloan leaned over a monitor, tracing digital footprints with precision. "They're closing in," he murmured. "We left too many traces yesterday. They've been tracking our IP addresses, surveillance feeds, and even some public cameras. The contractors are good. Extremely good." Ethan's stomach nodded. "How close?" "Hours," Sloan said flatly. "Maybe less. They'll hit hard, and they won't hesitate." Marissa looked up from her laptop, eyes sharp and determined. "We've encrypted everything, backed up the drives in multiple locations. But we can't stay here. Not tonight. We need to get it into the right hands. Someone powerful enough to protect the story from being buried again." Ethan nodded, gripping the edge of the table. "And the risk?" Marissa's jaw tightened. "High. Anyone we involve becomes a target." A faint tap-tap-tap sounded at the window. Max growled low, hackles raised. Ethan froze, heart thudding in his chest. The sound came again, soft but deliberate. Someone was outside. Sloan motioned toward the door. "Time's up. They've found us." Ethan's pulse spiked. "Move? Move," Sloan confirmed. They grabbed the drives, the files, and the box, moving silently down the fire escape into the alley below. Rain had returned, slicking the bricks and pooling in puddles along the darkened streets. Every shadow seemed alive, every distant car a possible threat. As they reached a narrow street, headlights cut through the rain. Black SUVs, 3 of them, blocked the road. Doors opened, and figures in dark suits emerged, moving with terrifying precision. Sloan hissed, split. Ethan ran left, Max leaping beside him, Sloan right. Marissa darted down another alley, clutching one of the backup drives. The chase was immediate and relentless. Boots splashed through water, tires squealed on wet asphalt, and rain pelted down, blurring vision. Ethan's lungs burned, Max barking, dodging puddles, and his adrenaline pushed him forward, faster than he thought possible. Behind him, shouts rang out. The contractors were coordinating, moving as a single unit, cutting off exits, anticipating every turn. Ethan's mind raced, calculating angles, streets, and potential escape routes, while Max's instincts kept them just one step ahead of capture. They ducked into an abandoned subway station, its gates rusted and chained. Ethan tugged at a weak panel, pushing it open just enough to slip inside. Max darted through, ears alert. The echo of pursuit followed heavy, deliberate footsteps pounding the concrete above. They raced down the dark tunnels, only lit by Ethan's flashlight, which flickered from the damp air. Marissa appeared behind them, panting, carrying the drive like a lifeline. "We have to keep moving," she shouted. The tunnels twisted and turned like a labyrinth. Ethan's legs burned, heart hammering, adrenaline and fear fusing into one relentless drive forward. Max occasionally barked at corners, sensing danger, always alert. Finally, they reached an emergency exit leading to a desolate construction site. The rain washed the concrete slabs, turning the area into a maze of puddles and shadows. They paused for a split second to catch their breath. Sloan scanned the perimeter. "They've got snipers," he said quietly. "High vantage points." This was a setup. Ethan froze. "A trap?" "Yes," Sloan replied grimly. "They wanted to flush us out of the city, push us into a corner. And now," he gestured toward the SUVs closing in, "now we fight smart, or we die trying." Max growled low, teeth bared, stepping forward protectively. Ethan knelt beside him. "Easy, boy. Stay close." Marissa swallowed hard. "We need a distraction. Something big enough to draw their attention away from us." Sloan's eyes narrowed. "There's a crane. Over there. We can rig it, make a scene. They'll investigate the noise, giving us a window to reach the river escape." Ethan nodded. "Let's do it." They moved as a unit, precise, silent, each step calculated. Max stayed close, padding along silently. Sloan climbed the crane first, rigging it with loose construction cables and a few leftover wooden planks. Marissa and Ethan stayed low, ready to sprint toward the river when the noise drew the pursuers' attention. Minutes passed, each second stretching impossibly long. Finally, Sloan triggered the crane. A loud crash resounded through the construction site, metal groaning, planks splintering. The contractor's attention snapped to the commotion. "Go!" Sloan yelled. Ethan, Max, and Marissa bolted, sprinting toward the riverbank. Rain pelted their faces, drenching them instantly, but they didn't slow. Shadows pursued, voices shouted, boots splashed in water. The river loomed ahead, dark, cold, but their only way out. They reached a small, abandoned barge tied to the dock. Ethan shoved it into the water. Max leapt first, swimming instinctively. Ethan followed, Max paddling beside him. Marissa jumped aboard, clutching the drive to her chest. Behind them, shouts erupted and gunfire cracked across the water. Bullets splashed near the barge, pinging off metal. Ethan's heart raced, but adrenaline sharpened every sense. The barge drifted silently at first, then Ethan used the oars, paddling hard to push into the river's current. The city skyline receded behind them, headlights disappearing into the rain-soaked darkness. Sloan stayed on the shore, shadows swallowing his form. He had rigged a second distraction. Gasoline-soaked debris along the crane site ignited, flames licking upward, drawing the attackers' full attention. Ethan exhaled, chest heaving. Max barked once, then rested against his side, soaked but alert. Marissa opened the drive, scanning files with a laptop powered by a portable battery. "Everything's intact," she said breathlessly. "We're alive. And we have it all." Ethan nodded, trying to process the night. They had escaped, barely, but the danger wasn't gone. It had only evolved. Whoever had orchestrated this would regroup, and their next attempt could be deadlier. Max's ears pricked. Ethan followed the dog's gaze and froze. Across the river, faint headlights glimmered in the distance, moving slowly along the shoreline. Not random, not civilian. Someone was tracking them. Sloane's voice came from the shadows of the far shore, low and commanding through a walkie-talkie. "Stay alert. We're not safe yet." Ethan gripped the oar tighter, scanning the dark water. "How much longer?" he asked, voice shaking. "Until it's in the right hands," Marissa said, voice firm. "Until the world knows the truth." Ethan looked at Max. The dog barked softly, as if reminding him that even the smallest allies could make the difference between life and death. Somewhere out there, a shadowy organization that had hunted them for decades waited. But tonight, for the first time, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope and determination. Because they were alive, together, and carrying the evidence that could expose a conspiracy built on lies, fear, and death. And no one, not the contractors, not corrupt agents, not history itself, would stop them without a fight. The river stretched endlessly before them, dark and churning beneath the storm-dark sky. Ethan rowed hard, Max paddling alongside, ears alert to every ripple and shadow. Marissa crouched at the far end of the barge, clutching the portable drives like sacred relics. Rain plastered their hair and clothing, water dripping down faces streaked with dirt and adrenaline. Behind them, distant headlights faded, swallowed by the city's curves and shadows, but the memory of pursuit remained. "They won't give up," Sloane's voice crackled over the walkie-talkie, deep and commanding. "Even if they lose tonight, they'll strike again. We finish this now, or we disappear trying." Ethan swallowed hard, gripping the oar tighter. "I never imagined my life would come to this," he admitted quietly, voice hoarse. Max nudged his arm, as though urging him forward. "You didn't choose this," Sloane replied, voice steady. "But you're part of it now. You have a chance to make it right." Hours passed in silence, broken only by the slap of oars against water, and Max's occasional bark and a passing shadow. The river twisted like a ribbon of ink under the moonlight. They finally reached a small dock near a quiet suburb, a place Marissa had identified as secure. Ethan tied the barge and helped Max onto the shore, shaking rain from his coat. "We made it," he muttered, though unease lingered. The river hadn't purified them from danger. It had merely delayed it. Marissa set up her laptop, connecting the drives to a secure, encrypted server. The air smelled of wet earth, metal, and ozone from the storm. She typed rapidly, fingers flying over keys, eyes scanning documents, photos, and scanned tapes. Sloane stood near the edge of the dock, silent, watching for any signs of their pursuers. Ethan knelt beside Max, running his hand over the dog's wet fur. "You've been amazing, buddy," he whispered. Max wagged his tail faintly, licking Ethan's hand, aware of the tension, but trusting their presence. Finally, Marissa leaned back, exhaustion evident, but her eyes sharp with triumph. "Everything's ready. Verification complete. Cross-references intact. This goes public in 5 minutes." Sloane's hand rested briefly on Ethan's shoulder. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Absolutely. People deserve to know. No one should disappear. No one should be silenced like this ever again." Marissa's finger hovered over the final command key. She glanced at Ethan, then Sloane. "Once I hit send, there's no turning back." Ethan nodded. "Do it." The files were uploaded simultaneously to multiple news platforms, encrypted and timed for public release. The world would see what had been hidden. Decades of secret operations, experiments, and disappearances, lives erased for convenience and power. The silence afterward was almost deafening. Ethan, Sloan, and Marissa watched the first notifications trickle in. Journalists tweeting about Project Harbinger, local news channels catching wind of the leaks, and even social media igniting with disbelief and outrage. But the victory was short-lived. Across town, a sleek black SUV slid silently into an empty parking lot. Inside, two men in suits monitored the sudden surge of attention. One spoke into a secure line, voice clipped and cold. They've released it. Contain the fallout. Neutralize leaks and find Murray immediately. Ethan's stomach sank. The storm was far from over. Pack up, Sloan said quietly. We move, now. They sprinted through alleys and empty streets, Max darting between their legs with astonishing agility. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, shadows of emergency vehicles reacting to the chaos the leaked files had unleashed. The contractors, desperate and cornered, would not hesitate. They reached a small warehouse, prearranged by Marissa, for safe refuge. The building smelled of dust and old machinery, but it was secure, fortified enough for a temporary hold. Marissa activated portable signal jammers, shutting down nearby surveillance grids. Finally, Ethan allowed himself a moment to breathe. Max padded over, curling at his feet. We did it, buddy, he whispered, voice tight with relief. The dog's eyes gleamed, as if he understood their lives had been saved, for now. Sloan paced slowly. This isn't over, he said grimly. They'll regroup, find a way to discredit the evidence, or worse. Marissa shook her head. The world is watching now. The truth is out. They can't erase it again. Ethan stared at the scattered files and drives, the physical evidence of a decades-long conspiracy. And if they come for us? Sloan stopped pacing, looked at him steadily. Then we fight smarter, not harder. We stay alive long enough to make sure justice sticks. And if they try to silence us? His eyes hardened. We make them regret it. Days passed. The files spread globally, news channels covering Project Harbinger, investigations launched, and whistleblowers surfacing to corroborate the story. The pressure on the hidden organization escalated. Their secret network, once untouchable, was now in full collapse. Yet danger lingered. Unknown operatives continued to track movements, but with the public spotlight, their actions were restricted. Ethan, Sloan, Marissa, and Max moved constantly, never staying in one place too long, always alert, always ready. One night, after weeks of careful maneuvering, Ethan sat beside Max on the roof of a safe house, looking over the city. The rain had stopped, leaving a shimmering cityscape below. The dog rested his head on Ethan's knee, calm and vigilant. Sloan approached, holding 2 cups of coffee. You think it's finally over? He asked quietly. Ethan shook his head slowly. No, but it's the first time in a long time that I feel alive. That what we did matters. Marissa joined them, holding a laptop open. Headlines scrolled across the screen. Decades-old government project exposed. Conspirators under investigation. Whistleblower Murray speaks out. Truth revealed. Max barked softly, tail wagging faintly. Ethan laughed, a dry, exhausted sound. Even you're impressed, huh? Sloan placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. You saved more than just yourself, he said. You saved history from being buried. And the people who were silenced. Their voices finally have a chance to be heard. Ethan looked down at Max. We couldn't have done it without you, buddy. Not one step of the way. The dog wagged his tail, licking Ethan's hand. Together, they had unearthed the truth that powerful people had fought to hide. Together, they had survived the pursuit, the lies, and the danger. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt hope. Some nights, the shadows would still lurk, reminders of the forces they had faced. But now, every dawn brought with it the knowledge that light had pierced darkness, and that truth, once discovered, could never be buried again. Max yawned, stretching under the faint glow of the city lights. Ethan smiled, brushing the rain from his hair. He felt the warmth of survival, loyalty, and courage. The desperate man he had been was gone. What remained was someone willing to fight, for justice, for truth, for those who could no longer fight themselves. And the city, though unaware of the lives changed behind the shadows, went on, illuminated now not only by streetlights, but by the light of a truth that could never be hidden again. Ethan, Sloane, Marissa, and Max sat in quiet solidarity, knowing that while danger might always linger at the edges of the world, they had won this night, and in doing so, had finally set the past free. The storm had passed, and the truth had emerged, unstoppable.